You know that feeling. You're trying to capture something exact, maybe a look on someone's face, or the specific way light hit the water,
Mhm.
or why one attempt failed completely while another just, well, didn't quite land.
Mhm.
You reach for a word, maybe a synonym you think works, but there's that little voice asking, is that really the right word? Does brittle mean exactly the same thing as fragile? Is telling something fabulous really the same as saying it's mythical?
Right.
We navigate these linguistic waters constantly, often sort of on autopilot, but lurking just beneath the surface are these layers of meaning that can, dramatically change what we communicate.
That little voice is definitely pointing to the incredible precision embedded in language. Words we casually group together as, let's say, synonyms often possess these distinct nuances, subtle differences in connotation or origin or application that make one the perfect fit and another just, well, close enough.
Yeah.
And understanding these distinctions isn't really about pedantry. It's about gaining a sharper lens, through which
Hmm.
to view and describe the world.
Absolutely. It's like upgrading our descriptive toolkit from, I don't know, a basic hammer to a whole set of precision instruments.
That's a great analogy.
And that's precisely what we're diving into today. We've got an amazing source guiding us not just any list of words, but carefully selected entries from a dictionary of synonyms and antonyms. It's like having a linguistic Sherpa leading us through some mountainous terrain, helping us see the subtle shifts in the landscape.
Right.
We'll be focusing on a really fascinating range of words, specifically those grouped from extrinsic all the way through feudal.
And this source, it doesn't just give you a list. It really breaks down the context, the implications, maybe even a bit of the history behind these related terms.
Hmm.
It reveals why you choose visage over face, for instance, or why perfidious cuts so much deeper than merely faithless.
Exactly.
It's about unlocking the power packed into each specific word choice.
So, our mission in this deep dive today is to really unpack these definitions, extract those, let's say, sparkling nuggets of insight, and discover the surprising facts that show us why these words, while definitely related, are actually far from interchangeable. Get ready for some genuine aha moments about words you've probably used your whole life without realizing their full power.
It's really about appreciating the craftsmanship in language, isn't it? The subtle engineering that allows us to articulate complex ideas and sensory experiences with accuracy and depth.
Okay, let's start our exploration. We'll begin by looking at words used to describe the external world, things outside of something else or outward appearance and structure. Our source kicks this section off by grouping words related to being external to a core.
Right. The first group explores what it means for something to be outside a thing, or its essential nature, or maybe its original character. It includes extrinsic, extraneous, foreign, and alien. And while they all point to outsideness, they differ pretty significantly in the kind of outsideness they describe.
Okay, let's unpack those layers then. Extrinsic sounds like the most basic one.
It is.
It strictly applies to what is distinctly outside the thing in question, or isn't derived from its essential nature or original derivation. The source gives the example, sentimental attachment that is extrinsic to the house's market value.
Hmm.
Okay, so my deep personal connection to my childhood home is absolutely real. It exists in relation to the house, right? But it has zero bearing on what a professional appraiser would value it at on the market.
Exactly.
It's outside the core definition of its financial worth. The key antonym provided is intrinsic.
That's a perfect illustration. Extrinsic means it exists alongside the thing, but it's not of the thing's core essence or value. Now, extraneous introduces a slightly different dimension.
Okay.
It also applies to what is on or comes from the outside, but here's the critical nuance.
Oh,
It may or may not be capable of becoming an essential part. The example used is extraneous arguments that obscure the real issue. Imagine a debate. Someone introduces points that aren't central to the topic. These arguments come from outside the core issue, and ideally they should remain outside. They're, irrelevant.
right.
But the word extraneous allows for the possibility that they could potentially be woven in, however inappropriately, and perhaps even become part of the discussion structure, even though they dilute or distract from the core. The core difference from extrinsic is this potential, however slight or undesirable, to integrate or become relevant. Its antonym, logically, is relevant.
Okay, I think I'm getting it. So extrinsic is just strictly outside, not part of the core nature or value. Extraneous is also outside, but it's often introduced in a way that suggests it might try to connect or could potentially be incorporated, even if it's irrelevant and maybe distracting, like weeds trying to get into a garden bed versus flowers growing in a completely separate pot.
That gardening analogy worked pretty well, actually. Extraneous things are weeds that might spread into the main bed. Extrinsic things are just, well, not in the garden at all.
Gotcha.
Moving on, foreign. This implies a difference so significant that the external thing is rejected, repelled, or simply incapable of being assimilated by the thing in question.
Hmm.
The source's example is quite vivid.
Yeah.
Inflammation resulting from a foreign body in the eye.
Hmm.
Your eye treats that speck of dust or splinter as fundamentally incompatible. It cannot become part of the eye. The body actively repels it, causing inflammation.
Right.
It's not just outside. It's fundamentally alien to the system's nature. The antonym here is germane.
Right, like a wrong blood type, maybe. It's not just different. The system actively recognizes it as incompatible and, rejects it.
Precisely. And alien takes that concept even further. It's stronger than foreign.
Mm.
It suggests a strangeness so profound that it actively leads to opposition, repugnance, or incompatibility.
Mm.
The example provided is powerful. A practice that is totally alien to our democratic principles. This practice isn't merely different or incompatible on a technical level. It feels fundamentally opposed to the core principles, provoking a strong negative emotional reaction or a sense of deep active conflict. The antonyms here are akin and assimilable.
Wow, okay. So let me see if I've got this straight. If something is extrinsic, it's just physically or conceptually outside, no inherent connection to the core nature. If it's extraneous, it's outside, but might try to butt in and could potentially connect, even if it's irrelevant and distracting. If it's foreign, it's so fundamentally different it's rejected, like the body rejecting an incompatible substance. And if it's alien, it's not only different, but actively feels hostile, repugnant, or fundamentally opposed to the core principles, like a practice undermining everything you believe in.
You've captured that progression perfectly. What's fascinating here is how these subtle differences are crucial for precise description and analysis. Think about how you describe external influences on, say, a culture or a business. Are they just influences from the outside that don't really touch the core identity, extrinsic? Yeah. Are they ideas from elsewhere that are being introduced but might distract, extraneous? Are they practices from another culture that the current one actively resists, foreign? Or are they ideas that feel fundamentally threatening and opposed to the very identity and values of the culture?
Yeah.
Knowing these distinctions provides a far more accurate and nuanced way to talk about external elements and their relationship to the core of something, whether it's a house, an argument, an eye, or a principle.
It's like needing the right filter for external things. Is it merely outside, potentially fitting in, fundamentally incompatible, or actively opposed? That is a brilliant way to frame it. It helps you classify not just that something is external, but how it's external and what its relationship is to the core.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, let's shift our focus slightly, but still within the realm of describing the external outward appearance, specifically faces and physical forms. The source groups words like face, countenance, visage, and physiognomy, and then another group: form, figure, shape, conformation, and configuration.
Okay, let's start with the words for faces. Face is clearly the most straightforward, right? The source calls it the simple, direct, and also the inclusive term for the front part of the head from forehead to chin. The example's pretty basic. A strikingly handsome face. It's just the physical reality.
Yes, face is the baseline, the physical structure itself. Now, countenance immediately adds a layer of meaning that goes beyond the purely physical.
Okay.
It applies to a face as seen and, importantly, as revealing a mood, character, or attitude. The example is the benign countenance of my grandmother. When you describe a grandmother's countenance as benign, you're not just noting the structure of her cheeks and chin. You're seeing kindness and gentleness reflected in her expression and overall bearing. The focus shifts from just the physical form to what that form expresses and conveys about the inner state or character.
Ah, so countenance is the face with expression, showing mood or character. It's the face telling a story, kind of.
Exactly. It's expressive. Then visage brings the focus back somewhat to the physical form, but with greater specificity than face. It pays attention to the shape, proportions, and sometimes how those physical features reflect changing moods. The example illustrates this focus on specific features. A penetrating gaze and an aquiline nose gave him a bird-like visage. This is about the distinct combination of physical traits, the gaze, the nose, that define a particular visage. It's more detailed about the structural specifics than face, and while it can reflect mood, that's sort of secondary to the description of the physical structure itself.
So visage is like a more detail-specific blueprint of the face's physical features, maybe noting how that specific structure can lend itself to certain expressions.
Yes, emphasizing the distinctive physical form and its appearance. Finally, physiognomy introduces an interpretive element. It suggests attention not just to the contours, but also to how those contours are read as revealing character qualities of mind or character.
Interpretive. How so?
Well, the example is revealing. A youth with the physiognomy of a warrior. This term goes beyond simply observing the shape or expression. It implies interpreting deeper, perhaps inherent character traits, or even destiny based on the physical features of the face. It's an ancient idea, really reading character in faces captured by this word.
Okay, let's unpack this. This is a really interesting progression. Face is the simple physical structure. Countenance is the face expressing mood or character. Visage is the detailed, specific physical structure and how that structure looks or reflects mood. And physiognomy is the most interpretive, looking at the physical features and inferring deep, inherent character or potential from them.
That's a fantastic way to break it down. What's fascinating here is how these words capture different ways we perceive and interact with outward appearance. We start with the basic physical fact, face, move to its expressiveness, countenance, then focus on its specific structural details, visage, and finally delve into the interpretive layer where we read character into those features, physiognomy.
Right.
It highlights how much more than just a physical object a face is to us. It's a canvas for emotion, a structure of unique details, and even, for some, a map of character.
It really underscores how language allows us to describe something as seemingly simple as a face with such varying levels of detail and interpretation. It's pretty amazing.
Precisely. Now let's look at the form group. Form, figure, shape, conformation, and configuration. These also deal with outward appearance, but focus more broadly on structure, outline, and how parts are put together.
Form seems like the foundational term here, much like face was for facial features. The source says it usually suggests reference to both internal structure and external outline, and often the principle that gives unity to the whole. The example is an architect who appreciates the interplay of forms. It's broad, fundamental, the essential structure and outline, the underlying organizational principle, right?
Yes, form is the comprehensive concept of structure and organization.
Yeah.
Figure narrows the focus. It applies chiefly to the form as determined by its bounding or enclosing outline.
Outlines.
Right, the example is cutting doll figures out of paper. Think of cutting a silhouette. Figure highlights that boundary line, the external outline that defines the form against its background.
Got it. So figure is essentially the outline, the contour, the shape's edge. What about shape itself then? How's that different?
Well, shape, while also suggesting an outline like figure, carries a stronger implication of the enclosed body or mass contained within that outline.
Ah, the mass.
Yes. The example is, the shape of the monument was pyramidal. When you say pyramidal shape, you're not just thinking about the triangle outline, you're picturing the solid volume of the pyramid itself. While figure might be the line drawing, shape is the mass or volume that outline contains.
Okay, comparing shape versus figure is subtle but clear. Now, figure is about the bounding line, the outline, the silhouette. Shape is about the mass or volume within that outline. That distinction makes sense in describing a paper cutout figure versus a solid monument shape. Okay.
Exactly. It differentiates between the boundary and what's contained within it. Then we have conformation. This term implies a complicated structure composed of harmoniously related parts.
Harmoniously related?
Yes. The example is a conformation that is well-proportioned and symmetrical. Conformation isn't just about the overall outline or volume. It's specifically about how the constituent parts are put together internally and whether they fit together in a balanced, proportional, or harmonious way. It emphasizes assembly and proportion.
Harmonious internal assembly, like how bones fit together in a body's conformation, or maybe how engine parts fit in a complex machine.
Precisely. It's about the integrated structure of parts. And finally, configuration. Configuration refers to the pattern formed by the disposition and arrangement of component parts.
The pattern arrangement.
The example is, modular furniture allows for a number of configurations. Here, the emphasis is less on the inherent harmony of the parts and more on their spatial arrangement or layout. Modular furniture parts are designed to be arranged in different ways, creating different spatial patterns or configurations. It emphasizes arrangement and the potential for rearrangement.
Ah, so contrast conformation, the harmonious parts fitting together inherently, versus configuration, the spatial arrangement or pattern of parts, which might be change. Conformation feels more inherent and maybe fixed, while configuration feels more external and possibly variable, like arranging puzzle pieces versus describing the puzzle pieces themselves. Is that fair?
That's a perfect contrast. Conformation speaks to the inherent structural assembly, while configuration speaks to the specific layout or pattern formed by arranging those parts. Why is this precision useful? Well, It allows us to describe not just what something looks like overall, form, figure, shape, but how its internal parts are integrated harmoniously, conformation,
Hmm.
and how its components are arranged in space, configuration.
Right.
This is pretty essential for clear communication in design, engineering, anatomy, or really anywhere the arrangement and interrelation of parts are key.
From the overall unifying principle form to the outline figure, the enclosed volume shape, the harmonious internal assembly conformation, and the specific external arrangement configuration, wow, it's truly a detailed vocabulary for describing physical structure.
Okay, moving beyond the external, let's dive into the fascinating complexities of human character, behavior, and interaction. This is where language gets really interesting, I think. We can start with trust and deception. Our source offers some profound insights here, beginning with the positive side, the faithful group.
Yes, the faithful group. This includes faithful, loyal, constant, staunch, steadfast, and resolute. The core idea uniting them seems to be firm adherence to whatever one owes allegiance, whether that's a person, a cause, a promise, or a principle.
Faithful is probably the most general term for this adherence. It implies unswerving adherence to a person or thing, or to an oath or promise by which a tie was contracted. The example is classic. Faithful to her marriage vows.
Okay.
It's about keeping a promise or obligation consistently. Its antonym, naturally, is faithless.
Simple, clear adherence to a promise. Okay.
Right. Now, loyal adds a specific crucial dimension. It stresses firm resistance to any temptation to desert or betray.
Oh, resistance.
Yes. The example, the army remained loyal to the Tsar, highlights this. While faithful is about sticking to the promise, loyal emphasizes the active internal resistance to external pressures or internal temptations that might cause you to abandon or betray that promise or person. It's about actively defending the allegiance. The antonym is disloyal.
That feels really distinct. Loyalty isn't just adherence. It's adherence under pressure, resisting the pull to abandon or betray. That's a key difference.
Exactly. It's resistance to temptation. Then constant shifts the focus slightly. It stresses continuing firmness of emotional attachment without necessarily implying strict obedience to promises or vows.
Emotional attachment.
Yes, the example is constant lovers. You can be constant in your deep affection for someone. Your feelings don't waver, even if the relationship isn't bound by formal vows or requires resistance to external pressure. It's about the enduring nature of the feeling itself. The antonyms are inconstant and fickle.
So constant is about the emotional state remaining firm over time. It's less about rules or pressure and more about the heart's endurance, maybe.
Precisely. Staunch brings us back to strength. It suggests fortitude and resolution and adherence, implying imperviousness to influences that would weaken it.
Imperviousness.
Yeah. The example, a staunch defender of free speech. This person isn't easily swayed or weakened in their defense of free speech. They possess a kind of solid, unyielding strength against arguments, pressures, or influences that would seek to erode their position.
Staunch is about being tough and resilient in your support or belief, not letting external forces weaken you. Got it.
Yes, strength and resistance to corrosive influences. Steadfast implies a steady and unwavering course in love, allegiance, or conviction. The example, steadfast in their support of democratic principles. This emphasizes consistency and resolve over time, holding a firm line without deviation or wavering, like a ship holding its course through a storm. Its antonym is capricious.
Unwavering consistency in your commitment or belief, holding that line.
And finally, resolute. This term emphasizes firm determination to adhere to a cause or purpose. The example is, resolute in his determination to see justice done. Resolute highlights the internal willpower, the sheer strength of decision and resolve that drives the adherence. It's about the inner conviction and fixed purpose behind the commitment, making it sound like a powerful internal decision.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. These aren't just 6 words for the same thing at all. They describe how someone is faithful or loyal. Is it primarily by keeping their promises faithful, by resisting temptation and pressure, loyal, staunch, by the enduring nature of their feelings, constant, by holding an unwavering line over time, steadfast, or by sheer force of inner will and determination, resolute? That's fascinating.
What's fascinating here is exactly that gradient, that spectrum of fidelity. Loyal is unique in specifically highlighting resistance to betrayal. Constant highlights emotion. Staunch highlights resilience against weakening influences. Steadfast highlights unwavering consistency. Resolute highlights internal determination. Choosing the right word gives you a powerful tool to describe not just the presence of fidelity, but its nature, its source, and its quality.
Yeah.
Think about describing a character in a book or maybe a historical figure. Choosing one of these words over another fundamentally changes how we understand their commitment.
It really adds depth to describing someone's character or their relationship to a cause.
Absolutely.
Now let's look at the unfortunate opposite side of that coin. Being untrue to allegiance. This is the faithless group. Faithless, false, disloyal, traitorous, treacherous, perfidious. The core idea here is being untrue to someone or something that has a right to expect your fidelity or allegiance. Okay, faithless seems like the broadest term here, covering any failure to keep a promise or pledge, or any breach or betrayal of obligation, allegiance, or loyalty. The example given is faithless allies refuse to support the sanctions. So it's a general term for breaking trust or failing to uphold an obligation. Its antonym is, of course, faithful.
Right. A general failure to adhere. False is even wider in scope, stressing the fact of failing to be true in any manner or degree, ranging from mere fickleness to cold, calculated treachery.
Wow. Any manner or degree.
Yes. The example is betrayed by false friends. This is a very broad term encompassing various kinds of degrees of untruth, insincerity, or failure to live up to what is expected. From superficial inconsistency to deep deceit, its antonym is true.
So false is like a general umbrella for any kind of untruth or not living up to expectations.
Yes. Disloyal brings us back specifically to allegiance, implying a lack of complete faithfulness in thought or words or actions to a friend, cause, leader, or country.
Lack of complete faithfulness.
Right. Example. Accuse the hostages of being disloyal to their country. This focuses on a failure to meet the full expectation of loyalty, perhaps falling short in commitment or not fully supporting, rather than necessarily engaging in outright betrayal. Its antonym is loyal.
Disloyal feels less severe than active betrayal, more like not fully being on someone's side when you maybe should be.
Exactly, a deficiency in loyalty. Traitorous significantly escalates the severity. It implies either actual treason or a serious betrayal of trust, often with harmful consequences. The example is stark. Traitorous acts punishable by death.
Yeah.
This term carries strong political or social weight, suggesting actions that could be considered treason against a state or a profound, damaging betrayal of a core trust.
That word immediately signals a grave offense, like selling secrets to the enemy or something like that.
It does, implying a major breach with severe consequences. Treacherous implies a readiness, a tendency or disposition to betray trust or confidence. Example, the victim of treacherous allies. This word describes the character of the person or entity, suggesting they are someone or something likely to betray, even if they haven't yet in this specific instance. It's about their inherent untrustworthiness.
So treacherous is about the character. They're the kind of person who would betray. They're not reliable inherently.
Precisely, describing their nature. And finally, perfidious. This is arguably the strongest term in the group. It adds to treacherous the implication of an incapacity for fidelity or reliability and of baseness or vileness.
Incapacity, right?
Wow. Yeah. Example, repeated and perfidious violations of the treaty. This term doesn't just suggest a readiness to betray, but a fundamental, deeply ingrained inability to be faithful or reliable combined with a sense of moral depravity or wickedness. It suggests a core rottenness that makes trust impossible.
Wow. This is a dramatic escalation. We go from a general failure to keep promises, faithless, to any kind of untruthfulness, false, a failure to meet full loyalty, disloyal, a major act of betrayal like treason, traitoresses, a character trait of being likely to betray, treacherouses, and finally, a profound, vile incapacity for fidelity itself, perfidious. That's quite a range.
What's fascinating here is how these words don't just label an action like breaking trust. They describe the nature of the betrayal, the degree of untruthfulness, and even the underlying character or intent of the one who is faithless. Using perfidious instead of disloyal paints a picture of a much deeper, more morally corrupted failure.
Yeah.
This is essential for describing complex characters, historical events, or even analyzing political relationships with precision.
You really feel the weight and the moral judgment embedded in the word choice there. Definitely.
Absolutely. Let's shift gears again, moving from the realm of truth and deception to things that are invented, not real, or maybe of questionable authenticity. This is the fictitious group. Fictitious, fabulous, legendary, mythical, and apocryphal. The core idea is having the nature of something imagined or mentally invented.
Fictitious seems like the most common term for things that are made up, doesn't it? The source says it implies fabrication, suggesting artificiality or contrivance more than deliberate falsification or deception. The example is useful. All names used in the broadcast are fictitious.
Mm-hmm.
This is often used for things created for narrative purposes, examples, or to avoid identifying real people without necessarily meaning to deceive. The antonym is historical.
Yes, simply made up, often for a specific purpose, like storytelling or illustration. Fabulous is interesting, though. It stresses the marvelous or incredible character of something without necessarily implying impossibility or actual non-existence.
Wait, without implying non-existence?
Right. The example is a land of fabulous riches. Something can be fabulous because it's amazing, wonderful, or perhaps exaggerated, but the word itself doesn't automatically mean it's completely untrue or imaginary. It can describe a reality that is exaggeratedly wonderful.
So using fabulous doesn't automatically label something as fake. It can just mean incredibly amazing or wonderfully exaggerated. That's a surprising nuance. I always thought fabulous meant like from fables, totally made up.
It can apply to things from fables, sure, but the core meaning is about the quality of being marvelous and incredible, distinct from its strict truth value. Legendary brings in the element of tradition. It suggests the elaboration of invented details and distortion of historical facts produced by popular tradition.
Ah, tradition.
Yeah, example. The legendary courtship of Miles Standish. This term is tied to stories passed down through generations, where truth and invention blend and evolve through popular recounting, often growing larger than life.
Legendary means rooted in tradition, where the story grows and changes over time.
Precisely. Mythical takes this further, often implying a fanciful, often symbolic explanation of facts or the creation of beings and events. Example, mythical creatures such as centaurs.
Right.
This term is strongly linked to cultural narratives, foundational stories, myths, and symbolism, often used to explain the world, its origins, or human nature through invented beings or events. Its antonym is also historical.
Mythical is about deep cultural stories, often symbolic or foundational, like origin myths or mythological beings. Makes sense.
Yes, tied to mythos and often carrying cultural weight. Finally, apocryphal shifts the focus to authenticity. It implies an unknown or dubious source or origin, or that the thing itself is dubious or inaccurate.
Dubious origin.
Yeah, example. A book that repeats many apocryphal stories. This term is used for claims or stories whose origin is questionable or unknown, leading to doubt about their truthfulness. It's about questionable authenticity, not necessarily being entirely invented from scratch, but being unreliable.
So what's invented or not real isn't just one category. It can be made up for narrative, fictitious, incredibly amazing or exaggerated, but possibly real, fabulous. A story evolved through tradition, legendary. A symbolic cultural story, mythical. Or a claim with dubious origins or accuracy, apocryphal. That's quite a breakdown.
What's fascinating here is how these words categorize different kinds of non-factuality or degrees of invention. They describe how or why something isn't strictly factual, whether it's simple invention for utility, exaggeration of the marvelous, evolution through cultural tradition, symbolic creation, or simply having an untrustworthy origin. Knowing these differences allows us to be far more precise when questioning the truth value or origin of a claim or story.
It helps you understand the nature of the invention or the reason behind the lack of factuality.
Absolutely. Shall we move into part 3? Exploring character, behavior, and how we navigate our interactions, starting with what it means to be fair or unbiased.
Great, yeah, let's do that. First up, the fairness group. Fair, just, equitable, impartial, unbiased, dispassionate, and objective. The core idea seems to be being free from favor toward any side in a situation where conflicting interests or claims are involved.
Fair is the broadest term, implying an elimination of one's own feelings, prejudices, and interests to achieve a proper balance of conflicting interests. The example given is a fair decision by a judge.
Right.
It's about balancing competing claims or interests correctly by setting aside personal leanings or biases to reach a balanced outcome. The antonym is unfair.
So fair is about achieving balance by putting personal bias aside.
Okay, right. Just implies a stricter standard, an exact following of a standard of what is right and proper.
Stricter.
Yes. Example, a just settlement of territorial claims. This term emphasizes adherence to a rule, a principle, or a standard of justice or rightness. It's more rigorous, implying correctness according to an established rule. The antonym is unjust.
Just is about sticking precisely to the rules of rightness or principle. Okay.
Yes. Equitable offers a slightly different angle. It implies a freer and less rigorous standard than just, and specifically suggests fair and equal treatment of all concerned.
Equal treatment.
Exactly. Example, provides for the equitable distribution of his property. While just is about adherence to a rule, equitable is about ensuring that everyone involved receives treatment that is fair and equal in outcome, which might sometimes mean a less rigid application of a rule to ensure that fairness is achieved in practice for everyone involved. The antonyms are inequitable and unfair.
So equitable focuses specifically on equality of treatment, making sure everyone gets a fair share or similar consideration, maybe bending the strict rule slightly if needed to achieve that equality.
Precisely. It's fairness achieved through equal consideration or distribution. Impartial stresses the absence of favor or prejudice in making a judgment or forming an opinion. Example, arbitration by an impartial third party. This term highlights the lack of bias specifically in the process of judging, deciding, or mediating. The antonym is partial.
Impartial is about not having favoritism towards one side. Straightforward.
Yes. Unbiased implies even more strongly an absence of all prejudice and implies the firm intent to be fair to all.
Even stronger. Firm intent.
Yes. Example, your unbiased opinion of the whole affair. This is stronger than impartial. It suggests a more active, conscious effort to identify and remove all potential sources of prejudice, implying a deliberate state of mind aimed at complete fairness. The antonym is biased.
So unbiased is like impartial, but with a more active, deliberate effort to stamp out all prejudice. Okay.
Exactly, a conscious commitment to fairness. Dispassionate suggests freedom from emotional involvement or from the influence of strong feeling, and often implies cool or even cold judgment.
Ah, no emotion.
Right. Example, a dispassionate summation of the facts. This focuses specifically on the absence of emotion influencing the judgment or analysis. It's about reason unaffected by feelings. The antonyms are passionate and intemperate.
Dispassionate means making judgments purely based on facts or logic without letting emotions color it.
Yes. Finally, objective. This stresses a tendency to view events or persons as apart from oneself and one's own interest or feelings. Example,
Right.
it's impossible for me to be objective about my own child.
Right.
This focuses on detachment from one's personal stake, involvement, or subjective perspective. It's about trying to see something from a detached external viewpoint as it exists independently of one's own connection to it. The antonym is subjective.
Okay, let's unpack this. This is a really rich group. We have different angles on what fair means. It can mean balancing interests and putting aside bias generally, fair. It can mean strictly following a rule or principle of rightness, just. It can mean ensuring everyone gets equal treatment or consideration, equitable. It can mean judging without favoritism, impartial, or actively striving against all prejudice, unbiased. It can mean judging without emotional involvement, dispassionate, or judging from a detached perspective without personal interest, objective. Whew.
What's fascinating here is how these terms provide a vocabulary for different methods or aspects of achieving fairness or avoiding bias. In law, you strive for a just application of statutes and perhaps an equitable distribution of assets.
Right.
A reporter aims for an impartial or unbiased account of events. A scientist seeks an objective analysis of data, free from personal hopes or biases. A therapist might need to be dispassionate when assessing a difficult family situation. Choosing the right word clarifies how fairness or neutrality is being achieved or defined in a specific context.
Yeah.
It highlights that fairness isn't a single simple concept, but really a multifaceted ideal pursued through different means.
That's incredibly useful for analyzing how decisions are made or how information is presented, understanding what kind of fairness is being claimed or attempted. Really useful.
Moving on, let's look at character flaws, the imperfections and weaknesses that are, well, part of being human. This is the fault group. Fault, failing, frailty, foible, and vice. The core idea is an imperfection or weakness of character.
Fault seems like the most general term for any imperfection. It implies a failure, not necessarily culpable or morally wrong, to reach some standard of perfection in disposition, action, or habit. The example is nice. A woman of many virtues and few faults. It's just a simple general imperfection, a departure from an ideal standard. The antonym is merit.
Yes, a basic imperfection or defect. Failing suggests a minor shortcoming in character of which one may even be unaware. Example, procrastination is one of my failings. This implies something less severe or significant than a fault, often a minor habit or tendency that isn't a major issue and might be something the person doesn't fully recognize in themselves. The antonym is perfection.
Less severe, maybe more of a minor habit, potentially something you're not fully conscious of. Okay.
Right. Frailty implies a general or chronic proneness to yield to temptation. Example. A fondness for chocolate is the most human of frailties.
Huh. Yes.
This suggests an inherent, often recurring weakness that makes you susceptible to giving in to impulses, desires, or temptations. It's about a general vulnerability to yielding.
An inherent weakness, a susceptibility to giving in to temptation. Got it.
Foible is quite distinct, actually. It applies to a harmless or endearing weakness or idiosyncrasy.
Harmless or endearing.
Yes, as an
Yeah.
example. Foibles that make him all the more lovable. This is often a minor, quirky habit, preference, or peculiarity that isn't harmful, doesn't necessarily stem from temptation, and might even be seen positively or as charming by others. Think of a specific, harmless eccentricity.
That's interesting. A character weakness that isn't negative, maybe even positive, like being slightly clumsy or maybe always wearing mismatched socks, that sort of thing.
Exactly, charming peculiarity. Finally, vice. This can be used generally for any imperfection, but it often suggests violation of a moral code or giving offense to the moral sensibilities of others.
Oh, moral code.
Yes, example. Gambling and drunkenness were the least of his vices. This is the strongest term, implying a serious moral failing, a corrupt habit or behavior that is considered wrong, immoral, or offensive by societal or personal standards.
So there's a real spectrum here, isn't there? We move from simple faults, general imperfections, to minor failings, less severe, maybe unconscious habits, inherent frailties, proneness to temptation, charming foibles, harmless quirks, and finally, the moral weight of a vice, a serious moral failing.
It's a vocabulary for classifying different kinds and severities of imperfections. Choosing foible instead of vice completely changes how we perceive the person's character, from charmingly flawed to morally corrupt. This allows us to be far more precise and even empathetic or judgmental when describing human imperfections.
It gives us words to capture everything from a cute quirk to serious moral bankruptcy. Okay.
Absolutely. Now let's look at how some of these character tendencies might manifest in outward behavior, specifically submissive behavior. This is the fawn group: fawn, toady, truckle, cringe, and cower. The core idea is to act or behave abjectly before a superior, often out of desire for favor or out of fear. The common antonym given is domineer.
Fawn implies seeking favor or attempting to ingratiate oneself by servile flattery or exaggerated attention and submissiveness. The example is pretty clear. Waiters fawning over a celebrity. This is about using excessive praise, flattery, and overly solicitous behavior specifically to win approval or favor from someone perceived as powerful or important.
Yes, using flattery and attentiveness to gain favor. Toady suggests the attempt to ingratiate oneself by an abjectly menial or subservient attitude.
Menial or subservient attitude.
Yeah, example. Never misses an opportunity to toady to his boss. While similar to fawn, toady focuses more on the general subservient attitude and actions aimed at getting into someone's good graces for personal advancement, often involving doing small, demeaning tasks or constantly agreeing. It's about general sycophancy for gain.
Toady feels like general bootlicking, acting subservient overall to get ahead.
Precisely. Truckle goes a step deeper. It implies the subordination of oneself and one's desires, opinions, or judgment to those of a superior.
Subordination of oneself.
Yes. Example. The rich are used to seeing others truckle. This is about giving up your own will, your own thoughts, your own stance on something, and bending entirely to the will, opinions, or desires of someone perceived as superior. It's a surrender of personal autonomy.
That's a significant sacrifice of self, not just acting subservient, but actually giving up your own judgment or opinion to go along with the superior. That's quite something.
It is. Now, cringe introduces the element of fear. It suggests a bowing or shrinking in physical or mental distress or in fear or servility. Example, cringing before a blow. This implies a reaction rooted in fear or overwhelming pressure, leading to a physical or mental shrinking away from someone or something perceived as threatening or dominant.
So cringe is a reaction to fear or distress, often involving a physical shrinking away or flinching.
Yes, a fear-driven physical or mental withdrawal. Cower is stronger than cringe in its emphasis on deep, abject fear. It suggests a display of abject fear before someone who threatens or domineers, often involving trembling or shrinking into oneself.
Abject fear.
Yeah. Example.
Yeah.
As an adult, he still cowered before his father. It's about profound, paralyzing fear, leading to a visible display of timidity and shrinking away.
Cower is about profound, overwhelming fear causing you to physically recoil or shrink away.
Exactly. So these words describe different drivers and manifestations of submissive behavior. Seeking favor through flattery, fawn, or general subservience, toady, surrendering one's own will and judgment, truckle, or reacting out of fear or distress, cringe, cower. They aren't just synonyms for submissive, they reveal the motivation and the nature of the submission.
Right.
Knowing the distinction is crucial for understanding power dynamics and character motivations.
It helps you analyze why someone is acting subserviently. Are they after something? Are they giving up their principles? Or are they simply afraid? Really useful.
Let's turn to words that describe not being severe or rigorous, often in applying rules or judgment. This is the forbearing group. Forbearing, tolerant, lenient, and indulgent. The core idea is not being inclined to be severe or rigorous.
Forbearing implies patience under provocation and deliberate abstention from harsh judgment, punishment, or vengeance. Example, the most forbearing of music teachers. This sounds like actively choosing not to react severely or harshly, even when there is clear reason or provocation to do so. It suggests a deliberate exercise of self-restraint and patience. The antonym is unrelenting.
Yes, intentional restraint, despite provocation. Tolerant implies a freedom from bias or dogmatism and a reluctance to judge or restrict others harshly who hold opinions or doctrines different from one's own. Example, a very tolerant attitude toward dissenters.
Ah, different opinions.
Right. This is specifically about accepting differences, particularly in beliefs, views, or practices, without harsh judgment or attempts to suppress them. It's about open-mindedness towards differing perspectives. The antonym is intolerant.
Tolerant is about accepting different ideas, opinions, or ways of being without judging them harshly.
Got it. Right. Lenient implies softness of temper and a relaxation of discipline or rigor. Example, lenient parents pay for it later. This is about being less strict in applying rules, punishments, or expectations, often stemming from a gentle or easygoing nature. Can sometimes have a slightly negative connotation, suggesting a potential lack of necessary firmness that might lead to undesirable consequences. The antonyms are stern and exacting.
Lenient is about reducing strictness, often due to a gentle nature, and it might not always be seen as positive. Interesting.
Precisely. It's a softening of discipline that might be viewed critically. Indulgent implies compliancy, mercifulness, and a willingness to make concessions out of charity or clemency. Example, an aunt indulgent of her nephew's and niece's shortcomings.
Making concessions.
Yes, this is about giving in to requests, making excuses, or excusing shortcomings, often out of kindness, mercy, or sometimes a doting affection that prevents setting appropriate boundaries or enforcing discipline. The antonym is strict.
Okay, so forbearing is patient restraint despite provocation. Tolerant is about accepting different views. And lenient and indulgent are more about applying rules or discipline or not applying them. Lenient being generally less strict, and indulgent being willing to make concessions or excuse things, often from kindness or doting affection.
You've nailed the distinctions. These words describe different reasons or methods for not being severe. Is it a conscious choice of restraint, forbearing? An open attitude towards difference, tolerant? A soft approach to discipline, lenient? Or a willingness to make concessions out of kindness, even potentially excessively indulgent? Understanding this helps analyze approaches to discipline, management, or interpersonal relationships.
It gives you a much more precise way to describe someone's approach to authority or judgment.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's turn to directness in communication with the frankness group. Frank, candid, open, and plain. The core idea is showing willingness to tell what one feels or thinks without holding back.
Frank stresses a lack of reticence in expressing oneself and connotes freedom from shyness, secretiveness, or even considerations of tact or expedience. Example, frank discussions on arms control. This sounds like speaking directly, sharing your thoughts and feelings without hesitation, and potentially without filtering for politeness or strategic advantage. The antonym is reticent.
Yes, direct, unfiltered, possibly blunt. Candid adds a layer of sincerity and honesty, especially in offering unwelcome criticism or opinion.
Ah, especially unwelcome criticism.
Yes. Example, a candid appraisal of her singing ability. This isn't just about being direct, it's about being honest, particularly when the truth is difficult, sensitive, or critical. It implies a sincerity and unwillingness to sugarcoat, even if it's uncomfortable. The antonym is evasive.
Candid is being honest even when it's hard or might hurt someone's feelings. It feels courageous in a way.
It often does, yeah. It requires sincerity in a difficult moment. Open implies frankness and candor, but suggests more artlessness than frank and less earnestness than candid.
Artless.
Yes. Example, Young children are open and artless in saying what they think. This suggests a straightforwardness that comes from a lack of social filtering, perhaps due to innocence, simplicity, or a natural lack of inhibition, rather than a deliberate choice to be blunt or honest. The antonyms are close and clandestine.
Open is straightforward because maybe you haven't learned not to be, or maybe you just have a naturally simple, direct nature.
Mm.
Okay.
Exactly. Unfiltered due to nature or innocence. Plain stresses a lack of ambiguity and subtlety in expression. Example, I was very plain about telling them to leave. This term focuses on clarity and directness, ensuring the message is unmistakable and easy to understand, leaving no room for misinterpretation.
So frank is just saying what you think, maybe without tact. Candid is being honest, especially when it's difficult or critical, implying sincerity. Open is being straightforward, perhaps artlessly or innocently so. And plain is being clear and direct to avoid any ambiguity. Is that about right?
That's a good summary. What's fascinating here is how these differ in their motivation and social awareness. Open is often unintentional or natural. Frank is intentional directness, potentially without regard for tact. Candid is intentional honesty, specifically valued in difficult situations. Plain is intentional clarity aimed at unmistakable communication.
Right.
They offer different shades of what it means to communicate directly, from innocent straightforwardness to deliberate, pointed honesty.
It shows that telling the truth, being direct, isn't just one thing. It can be driven by different intentions and manifested in different styles.
Okay, shall we move to part 4? Focusing on outcomes, conditions, and states of being. We can start with describing remarkable efforts and achievements.
Sounds good. First up, efforts and achievements. Feat, exploit, achievement. These words describe remarkable deeds, but they seem to emphasize different aspects.
They do. Feat applies to an act involving strength, dexterity, skill, or daring. Example, the feat of crossing the Atlantic in a balloon. The focus is on the specific act itself and the impressive skill or daring required to accomplish it. It highlights the difficulty and accomplishment of the action.
So, feat is about the impressive act requiring skill or daring.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exploit suggests an adventurous, brilliant, or heroic act. Example, his celebrated exploits as a spy. This adds elements that elevate the act beyond just skill or daring. It includes adventure, brilliance, cleverness, or heroism, often with a sense of excitement or daring enterprise.
Exploit adds flair, adventure, or heroism to the impressive act. It definitely sounds more exciting.
Exactly. It imbues the act with those qualities. Achievement implies hard-won success in the face of difficulty or opposition.
Hard-won success.
Yes. Example, honored for her achievements as a chemist. The focus here is less on the nature of the act itself and more on the success that was gained, particularly when it was earned by overcoming significant challenges or resistance. The antonym is failure.
So the difference in emphasis is the act itself requiring skill, daring, feat, the nature of the act being adventurous, heroic, brilliant, exploit, or the success gained specifically by overcoming difficulty, achievement.
Precisely. Choosing between them lets you highlight what was most remarkable about the deed, the skill involved, the adventurous spirit, or the successful struggle against odds.
Now, productivity. Fertile, fecund, fruitful, prolific. The core idea seems to be producing or capable of producing offspring or fruit, extended figuratively to producing ideas, works, etc.
Fertile implies the basic power to reproduce or assist growth, or readiness of invention or development in a figurative sense. Examples, fertile soil, literal, or a most fertile imagination, figurative. This is about the basic capacity or potential to produce or generate. The antonyms are infertile and sterile.
Basic capacity or potential to produce something. Got it.
Fecund emphasizes abundance or rapidity in bearing fruits, offspring, projects, inventions, or works of art. Example, came from a remarkably fecund family, literal, or a fecund period for artistic innovation, figurative. This focuses on the rate or quantity of production, suggesting a high output or quick generation. The antonym is barren.
So fecund is about producing a lot or quickly. It's about the volume or speed of production.
Yes, quantity or speed. Fruitful adds to fertile and fecund the implication of desirable or useful results.
Ah, useful results.
Exactly. Example, undertook fruitful research in virology. This isn't just about producing something, but producing something that is good, useful, valuable, or has positive outcomes. It focuses on the quality or value of what is produced. The antonyms are unfruitful and fruitless.
Fruitful is about the quality or usefulness of the results. You might be fecund, produce a lot, but not fruitful if what you produce isn't actually good or useful.
Exactly. The value of the output. Prolific stresses rapidity of spreading or multiplying by or as if by natural reproduction. Example, one of the most prolific writers of science fiction. This focuses specifically on the rate of output, or the speed at which something is produced or multiplies itself, often suggesting a high volume over time. The antonyms are barren and unfruitful.
So let me see. Fertile is the basic capacity or potential. Fecund is about how much or how quickly things are produced, quantity or speed. Fruitful is about the quality or usefulness of the results. And prolific is specifically about the rate of output or multiplication over time.
That's a great summary of the distinctions. They describe different dimensions of productivity, the potential, quantity, speed of generation, the value of the outcome, and the rate of output over time. They give us precise ways to describe not just that something produces, but how effectively, how much, and with what result.
Okay, now let's look at frustrating efforts stopping someone from achieving their goal. This is the frustrate group. Frustrate, thwart, foil, baffle, balk, circumvent, and outwit. The core idea is to check or defeat another's desire, plan, or goal.
Frustrate is the most general term for making efforts useless. It implies making all efforts vain or ineffectual, however vigorous or persistent they are. Example, frustrated all attempts at government reform. This means rendering someone's work or struggle pointless, making it so their efforts have no impact or desired result. The antonym is fulfill.
Making someone's efforts useless, like spinning your wheels and getting nowhere. Okay.
Precisely. Thwart introduces the idea of active opposition. It suggests frustrating or checking by deliberately crossing or opposing one who is making headway.
Active opposition.
Yes. Example, the park department is thwarted by public indifference to littering. This is about something actively standing in the way and blocking progress that is already underway.
Thwart is actively blocking someone who is trying to move forward or make progress.
Yes. Foil implies a checking or defeating so effectively as to discourage further effort. Example, her parents foiled my efforts to see her. This doesn't just stop the action now, but it's done in a way that takes away the motivation, energy, or hope to try again later. It discourages persistence.
Foil stops you, but also makes you give up trying again. That's distinct. I like that one.
It is. Baffle brings in confusion. It implies frustrating by confusing or puzzling. Example, baffled by the maze of rules and regulations. This stops progress, not by opposition or rendering efforts useless, but by making things so unclear, complicated, or confusing that the person doesn't know what to do next or how to proceed.
Stopping someone by completely confusing them. Yeah, that happens.
Balk suggests the interposing of obstacles or hindrances that block movement or progress. Example, legal restrictions balked police efforts to control crime. This is about putting specific barriers, impediments, or roadblocks in the way that prevent forward movement or achievement. The antonym is forward.
Balk is about placing obstacles, putting up roadblocks.
Oh. Circumvent implies frustrating by means of a particular stratagem, often finding loopholes or indirect routes. Example, circumvented the law by finding loopholes. This isn't a direct confrontation or block, but a way of getting around the rules, procedures, or expected path designed to achieve the goal, thereby frustrating the original intention. The antonyms are conform and cooperate.
So circumvent is using strategy, finding a clever way to go around the obstacle or rule to frustrate the original plan. Kind of sneaky.
Exactly. Using cleverness to avoid direct confrontation and still achieve a counter goal or block the original one. Outwit suggests frustrating or circumventing specifically through the use of craft and cunning. Example, the rebels outwitted the army repeatedly. This is about defeating someone's plans or efforts by being smarter, more strategic, or more cunning than they are.
So frustrating effort can be done in so many different ways. By rendering it useless, frustrate, direct opposition, thwart, discouraging future attempts, foil, causing confusion, baffle, putting up physical or procedural obstacles, using clever strategy to go around rules, circumvent, or simply by being more cunning, outwit. Wow.
What's fascinating here is how these words provide a rich vocabulary for the different methods of hindering, obstructing, or defeating someone's plans, from blunt force, the psychological tactics, procedural blocks, or intellectual superiority.
It's like a tactical dictionary for describing conflict and opposition. That's great.
Okay, let's look at the outcome of failure or bareness, when efforts just don't produce the desired result. This is the futile group. Futile, vain, fruitless, bootless, and abortive. The core idea is being barren of or producing no result.
Futile may connote completeness of the failure or the inherent unwisdom of the undertaking from the start. Example, a futile search for survivors of the crash. This emphasizes that the effort produced absolutely zero results, or that the entire endeavor was inherently pointless and had no chance of success. Sounds pretty final. The antonym is effective.
Yes, utterly useless or inherently pointless. Vain is simpler. It usually implies simple failure to achieve a desired result. Example: a vain attempt to get the car started. This is straightforward non-success. You tried to achieve something and it didn't happen. It doesn't necessarily carry the weight of inherent pointlessness or massive effort.
Vain is just, it didn't work. A simple lack of success. Okay.
Fruitless comes close to vain, but often suggests long and arduous effort or severe disappointment after investing considerable time and energy.
Arduous effort?
Yes, example: fruitless efforts to obtain a lasting peace. This implies the significant, often difficult effort was invested, but without any desired outcome or reward, leading to a sense of disappointment or wasted energy. The antonym is fruitful.
Fruitless implies effort, often hard or long, that didn't pay off. Like tilling the soil, but nothing grew. Yeah.
Exactly. Bootless, which is chiefly literary now, applies more specifically to petitions or efforts to obtain relief. Example: a bootless request for aid. This term applies primarily to requests, appeals, or efforts aimed at getting help or relief that yield no positive response.
Interesting. A word specifically for unsuccessful appeals or requests. Didn't know that one.
Yes, a somewhat niche term these days, but useful in that context. Finally, abortive suggests failure before plans are fully matured or activities effectively begun. Example: an abortive attempt to escape. This means the failure occurred at a very early stage, perhaps before the plan was fully executed or had a real chance to develop. The antonym is consummated.
So failure isn't just one thing. It can be utterly pointless or completely unsuccessful, futile, simply not achieving the goal, the result of significant effort without reward, fruitless, specifically for an unsuccessful request, bootless, or failing right at the very beginning, abortive.
It's about classifying failure by its nature, pointless, its outcome, simple non-success, the effort involved, arduous, the context, requests, or its timing, early stage. Choosing between them provides critical information about why something failed and what the experience of that failure was like.
It makes you think much more precisely about the specific kind of failure you're describing.
Okay, let's look at the concept of fullness now. Full, complete, plenary, and replete. The core idea is containing all that is wanted or needed or possible.
Full seems the most general term. It implies the presence or inclusion of everything that is wanted or required by something or that can be held, contained, or attained by it. Example: a full schedule of appointments. This is the general term for having everything required or being filled to capacity. The antonym is empty.
Yes, general completeness or capacity. Complete applies when all that is needed or wanted is present. Example: the report does not give a complete picture of the situation. This emphasizes meeting a specific standard or having everything that is necessary or required for a particular purpose or context. The antonym is incomplete.
Complete means it meets the requirements. Nothing necessary is missing.
Okay, plenary adds a significant layer of absoluteness. It adds to complete the implication of fullness without qualification and strongly suggests absoluteness. Example: given plenary power as commander-in-chief.
Plenary power, yeah.
This means absolutely, totally complete, with no limitations, exceptions, or qualifications whatsoever. It signifies absolute completeness or authority. The antonym is limited.
Plenary is absolutely, unqualifiedly full or complete total power, total presence. That's a strong word.
Yes, emphasizing absoluteness. Replete stresses abundance of supply and implies being filled to the brim or even to satiety. Example: a speech replete with innuendos and half-truths. This means filled to overflowing, abundantly supplied or crammed with something. It often suggests being maximally full or even overfull.
Replete is overflowing or super abundantly filled with something. Okay.
Right. So these terms range from meeting a specific standard, complete, to containing everything possible or required, full, to being absolutely unqualifiedly complete, plenary, to being abundantly filled, even overflowing, replete. Choosing the right word communicates not just that something is full, but in what way and to what degree it is full or complete.
It shows different levels and types of containing or possessing everything needed or possible. Makes sense.
Now let's touch on physical states, specifically firmness and fragility, starting with firmness. Firm, hard, solid. The core idea is having a texture or consistency that resists deformation or penetration.
Firm implies compactness and coherence, and often elasticity of substance, allowing it to resist pulling, distorting, or pressing while having some give. Example: a firm mattress with good back support. This suggests a resistance that is resilient, that holds its form but might yield slightly under pressure and bounce back. The antonyms are loose and flabby.
Yes, resistant, but with some elastic give. Hard implies impenetrability and a nearly complete but inelastic resistance to pressure or tension. Example: a diamond is one of the hardest substances known. This is rigid, unyielding resistance. Pressure doesn't deform it, it resists completely. The antonym is soft.
Hard is rigid, unyielding resistance. It doesn't give at all.
Exactly. Solid implies a texture of uniform density throughout, making it not only firm, but also consistently resistant to external deforming forces throughout its mass. Example: solid furniture that will last. This emphasizes uniformity of density and consistent resistance throughout the entire object.
Okay, so you can contrast the elastic resistance, firm, the rigid resistance, hard, and the uniformly dense, consistent resistance, solid.
They describe different qualities of resistance based on the material's properties, whether it's resilient, rigid, or consistently dense and resistant throughout. Important for describing materials.
Now for fragility, things that break easily. Fragile, frangible, brittle, crisp, and friable. The core idea is easily broken.
Fragile implies extreme delicacy of material or construction, and a resulting need for careful handling. Example: a fragile antique chair. This breaks easily specifically because it is delicate or delicately constructed. The antonym is durable.
Breaks easily because it's delicate or made of delicate stuff, like fine glass.
Right. Frangible implies an inherent susceptibility to being broken without necessarily implying weakness or delicacy. Example: frangible stone used as paving material. Something frangible is breakable under certain conditions, but it's about its nature to break, not necessarily because it's weak or delicate. It can be breakable, even if it seems sturdy.
Interesting. Inherently breakable, regardless of whether it seems weak or delicate, like certain types of, I don't know, safety glass that shatters easily even if it's thick.
Precisely. Brittle implies a tendency to break sharply when subjected to stress and a lack of elasticity or toughness. Example: elderly patients with brittle bones. This describes something that snaps or cracks under pressure because it can't bend, stretch, or absorb the stress. It just breaks. The antonym is supple.
Snaps or cracks under stress because it has no give or toughness.
Okay. Crisp applies to a firmness and brittleness that is desirable, especially in some foods. Example: crisp lettuce. This takes the concept of brittleness, breaking easily or sharply, and applies it in a positive context, usually related to a pleasing texture in food.
Brittleness says a good thing, like a satisfying crunch. Yeah.
Exactly. And finally, friable. This applies to substances that are easily crumbled or pulverized. Example: friable soil. This breaks not by snapping or shattering, but by disintegrating or crumbling into small particles easily.
Breaks into small pieces, crumbles easily, like dry earth.
So these terms describe different ways things break or exhibit breakability due to delicacy, being inherently susceptible regardless of strength, frangible, snapping under stress, brittle, crumbling easily, friable, or having desirable brittleness, crisp. This precise vocabulary is crucial for describing material properties accurately.
It's a very specific language for different kinds of breaking or crumbling. Really nuanced.
Let's look at destiny and predetermined outcomes now. Fate, destiny, lot, portion, and doom. The core idea is a predetermined state or end that is unavoidable.
Fate implies an inevitable and sometimes an adverse outcome. Example: the fate of the mariners remains unknown. This often carries a sense of inevitability, but frequently with a connotation of negativity, uncertainty, or sadness. Sort of heavy.
Yes, inevitable, often with a negative cloud. Destiny offers a contrast. It implies something foreordained and often suggests a great or noble course or end. Example: our country's destiny. This has a more positive, elevated, or significant connotation than fate, implying a grand, purposeful, or heroic outcome that is meant to be.
Destiny feels more grand, noble, or purposeful than fate. More aspirational, maybe.
It does. Lot suggests a distribution or assignment by fate or destiny. Example: it was her lot to die childless. This is what has been allocated or assigned to a person by a higher power, chance, or the predetermined course of events, often focusing on the specific circumstances or conditions of their life.
A lot is like the specific circumstances or conditions assigned to you by fate, your particular situation.
Portion is similar to lot, but emphasizes the apportioning of both good and evil or difficult circumstances. Example: the portion that has been meted out to me. This highlights the mix of both positive and negative experiences, challenges, or circumstances that have been assigned to a person's life.
Portion implies a mix of both good and bad things that have been assigned by fate. Your share of life's ups and downs.
Finally, doom. This term distinctly stresses finality and implies a grim or calamitous fate. Example, if the rebellion fails, our doom is certain. This is the strongest term, implying an irreversible, overwhelmingly negative and terrible end. It carries a sense of utter disaster.
These words aren't just what will happen. They tell us how it feels or what kind of outcome it is inevitable and potentially bad. Fate, grand or noble destiny, simply assigned circumstances, lot, a mix of good and bad circumstances, portion, or absolutely terrible and final doom. Wow.
They capture different emotional textures and perspectives on the idea of a predetermined outcome. Choosing the right word allows us to convey whether the outcome is viewed with dread, hope, resignation, or a sense of grim finality.
Let's look quickly at favorable conditions, things pointing toward a happy outcome. This is the favorable group. Favorable, auspicious, and propitious. The core idea is pointing toward a happy outcome or success.
Favorable is the general term. It implies that persons involved are approving or circumstances are advantageous. Example, favorable weather conditions for a rocket launch. This means that the conditions are generally good, supporting, or advantageous for the purpose at hand, or that people involved are supportive. The antonyms are unfavorable and antagonistic.
General positive circumstances or approval.
Okay. Auspicious suggests the presence of specific signs and omens that promise success. Example, an auspicious beginning for a great partnership. This term focuses on indicators, signs, or events, usually at the start of something, that are interpreted as predicting or signaling a successful future outcome. It's about predictive signs. The antonyms are inauspicious and ill-omened.
Auspicious is specifically about signs or omens that predict good things or success, like seeing a rainbow before a journey, maybe.
That kind of idea, yes. Propitious, while milder than auspicious, describes events or conditions that constitute favorable indications and implies a continuing favorable condition. Example, the time was not propitious for starting a new business. This suggests conditions that are not only currently favorable but are likely to remain so, indicating that it's a good time to act because the favorable situation is expected to last. The antonyms are unpropitious and adverse.
So favorable is general advantage or approval. Auspicious is about signs predicting success, and propitious suggests conditions that are favorable and likely to stay favorable, indicating a good, lasting opportunity.
Right, moving from a general state of advantage to specific predictive signs, and then to a forecast of continued lasting favorability. They offer different perspectives on what makes a situation conducive to success.
Okay, let's move into our final part, part 5, the abstract and the evocative words for light, undesirable qualities, freedom, purpose, and things that come before others. Lots to cover here.
Let's start with light, describing how things shine or glow. This is the flash group. Flash, gleam, glance, glint, sparkle, glitter, glisten, glimmer, and shimmer. The core idea is simply to send forth light.
Flash is a sudden and transient burst of bright light. Example, lightning flashed. Brief, intense, and sudden, easy enough.
Gleam suggests a steady, subdued light, often seen through an obscuring medium or against a dark background. Example, the lights of the town gleamed in the valley below. Persistent, often seen from a distance or dimly, like a steady, soft light.
Persistent, often soft or seen from afar, like a lighthouse beam.
Could be. Glance suggests a bright, darting, intermittent light reflected from a moving surface. Example, sunlight glanced off the hull of the boat. The key is the reflection and the movement of the surface, causing the light to dart or flash briefly.
Light bouncing off something as it moves. Got it.
Glint implies a quickly glancing or gleaming light, often from a hard, polished, or metallic surface. Example, steel bars glinted in the moonlight. Quick, sharp, intermittent light, often with a hard quality.
Quick, sharp, hard light, maybe off metal or an eye.
Could be an eye, yes. Sparkle suggests innumerable moving points of bright light. Example, the sparkling waters of the Gulf. Multiple small points of light, often twinkling or in motion.
Lots of little moving points of light, like on water or jewels or maybe champagne bubbles.
Exactly. Glitter connotes a brilliant sparkling or gleaming, often suggesting a dazzling effect. Example, glittering diamonds. More intense, brilliant, and dazzling than sparkle.
A more intense, brilliant sparkle. Okay.
Glisten applies to a soft, persistent sparkle, from or as if from a wet or oily surface. Example, rain-drenched sidewalks glistened under the street lamps, specifically associated with the way wet or slick surfaces reflect light, giving a soft shine.
A soft, wet, or oily shine. Yeah, I can picture that.
Glimmer suggests a faint, obscured, or wavering gleam. Example, a lone light glimmered in the distance. Weak, unsteady light, often seen faintly or through something obstructing it.
Faint, unsteady, struggling light. Almost gone.
Shimmer implies a soft, tremulous gleaming or a blurred reflection. Example, a shimmering satin dress. A soft, wavy, undulating appearance of light or reflection, suggesting movement or fluidity.
A soft, wavy, or undulating light or reflection like heat haze or silk. Beautiful word.
What's fascinating here is how these terms paint incredibly specific sensory pictures of light, differing in intensity, duration, source, quality, sharp versus soft, and motion. Choosing glimmer over flash completely changes the image and the feeling it evokes, from a sudden shock of light to a faint, perhaps hopeful, distant light. This is where the precision of synonyms becomes truly poetic and evocative, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. You can almost see and feel the light just from the word you choose. It's amazing how specific language can be for sensory experience. Really powerful.
Let's look at another evocative group. Things that are conspicuously bad or objectionable. This is the flagrant group. Flagrant, glaring, egregious, gross, and rank. The core idea is conspicuously bad or objectionable, so bad you really can't ignore it.
Flagrant applies usually to offenses or errors so bad that they can neither escape notice nor be condoned. Example, flagrant abuse of the office of president. This means openly, obviously, and shamelessly bad or wrong, so much so that it cannot be overlooked or excused. Sounds serious.
Yes, openly and inexcusably bad. Glaring implies painful or damaging obtrusiveness of something that is conspicuously wrong, faulty, or improper. Example, glaring errors in judgment. This means so obvious and bad that it's uncomfortable, hard to ignore, and potentially causes harm or discomfort to witness or experience. The antonym is unnoticeable.
So obvious and bad it's uncomfortable or damaging to see, like a bright, unpleasant light forcing itself on you.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. Egregious is applicable to something that stands out by reason of its bad quality or because it is in poor taste. Example, made an egregious error. This means it's bad in a way that makes it noticeable or remarkable, often suggesting a significant departure from what is acceptable or tasteful.
Stands out from the norm specifically because it's bad or in very poor taste.
Okay. Gross implies the exceeding of reasonable or excusable limits of badness as applied to attitudes, qualities, or faults. Example, gross carelessness on your part. This means bad to an extreme degree, beyond what could be considered acceptable, minor, or excusable. The antonym is petty.
Bad to an extreme beyond what's reasonable or excusable. Got it.
Rank is strong. It applies to what is openly and extremely objectionable and utterly condemned. Example, it's rank heresy to say that. This is the strongest term, suggesting something that is not just bad, but profoundly offensive, utterly unacceptable, and completely disapproved of, often with moral disgust.
Okay, let's unpack this. These aren't just words for bad. They describe how bad something is and how it's perceived. Flagrant is openly, obviously, inexcusably bad. Glaring is so obviously bad it's uncomfortable or harmful to witness. Egregious stands out due to its badness or poor taste. Gross exceeds reasonable limits of badness, and rank is openly extremely objectionable and utterly condemned. That's a powerful set.
They capture different dimensions of conspicuous badness, from its visibility and inexcusability to its painful obtrusiveness, its tendency to stand out, its degree beyond acceptable limits, and the level of moral condemnation it provokes. Choosing between them allows for a precise level of opprobrium.
It gives you a whole spectrum of ways to say something is wrong and how strongly you feel about it.
Let's look at another behavior-focused group, being overly or insincerely ingratiating. This is the fulsome group. Fulsome, oily, unctuous, and oleaginous. The core idea is being too obviously extravagant or ingratiating to be accepted as genuine or sincere.
Fulsome implies that something which is essentially good, like praise or flattery, has been carried to an excessive and offensive degree. Example, the fulsome flattery of a celebrity interviewer. It's not that the flattery itself is bad, but there's so much of it, it's so over the top, that it becomes offensive and clearly insincere. Makes you cringe a bit.
Yes, a good thing overdone to the point of being offensive and insincere. Oily implies an offensively ingratiating quality, and sometimes suggests a smoothness or superficial benevolence that masks a sinister or dubious intent.
Masks intent.
Right. Example, oily land developers trying to persuade older residents to sell. This suggests a smooth, flattering, persuasive manner that feels insincere and potentially deceptive, often used to manipulate or hide less pleasant motives.
Smooth and insincere, potentially hiding a bad motive underneath, like a snake oil salesman, maybe?
That kind of vibe, yes. Unctuous implies the hypocritical adoption of a grave, devout, or spiritual manner. Example, the unctuous pleading of the First Amendment by pornographers. This term describes someone who adopts a tone or manner of false earnestness, often using religious, moralistic, or overly serious language to sound sincere, while their true motives are self-serving or questionable.
False sincerity, especially using serious or moralistic language.
Okay. Oleaginous may be used in place of oily to suggest pomposity or to convey a mocking note. Example, an oleaginous host fawning over female guests. It's similar to oily in its smoothness and insincerity, but adds a sense of smugness, self-importance, or a subtle mockery embedded in the ingratiating behavior.
So oleaginous is like oily, but with a touch of smugness or mockery.
Okay. These words describe different flavors of insincere ingratiation overdoing something positive, fulsome, smooth, and potentially deceptive flattery, oily, feigned moral or spiritual sincerity, unctuous, and smug or mocking smoothness, oleaginous. They aren't just about being fake. They describe how the fakeness is presented.
It highlights the specific technique of the insincerity. Interesting.
Let's look at the concept of freedom. Freedom, liberty, and license. The core idea is the power or condition of acting without compulsion or restraint.
Freedom is the broadest term, covering a wide range from total absence of restraint to merely a sense of not being unduly hampered or frustrated. Example, freedom of the press. This is the general state of being able to act, think, or speak without undue constraint. The antonym is necessity.
Yes, the general state of not being compelled. Liberty suggests the power to choose among alternatives or the release from former restraint or compulsion.
Power to choose, release.
Yes, example. The prisoners were willing to fight for their liberty. This emphasizes the ability to make choices and the state of being released from a constraint that was previously in place.
Liberty is about the power of choice and being released from being held back.
Okay, exactly. License is distinct. It implies unusual freedom granted because of special circumstances, or it may connote an abuse of freedom by willfully following one's own course without regard for propriety or the rights of others.
Ah, two meanings there.
Right. Example, poetic license, granted freedom, or the editorial takes considerable license with the facts, abused freedom. This term has these two main meanings: permission to deviate from normal rules, or the negative sense of using freedom carelessly to disregard rules or rights. The antonym is decorum for the negative sense.
So freedom is the general state of not being restrained. Liberty is the power to choose and being released from restraint. And license is either special permission to break rules or the negative idea of misusing freedom to disregard what's proper or right.
They show different aspects of being unrestrained, from a fundamental state to the specific power of choice or the nuanced idea of granted or misused latitude.
Now, functions and responsibilities. Function, office, duty, and province. The core idea seems to be the acts or operations expected of a person or thing.
Function, applicable to anything living, natural, or constructed, implies a definite end or purpose that the thing in question serves or a particular kind of work it is intended to perform. Example, the function of the stomach is to digest food. This describes the intended role, purpose, or work that a thing is designed or meant to do.
The job the thing is supposed to do, its purpose.
Okay.
Yes.
Office is typically applied to the function or service expected of a person by reason of his or her trade, profession, or special relationship to others. Example, exercise the offices of both attorney and friend. This is about the role, service, or set of responsibilities expected of a person specifically because of their position, profession, or relationship.
The job the person does because of their role or position?
Duty applies to a task or responsibility imposed by one's occupation, rank, status, or calling. Example, the lieutenant governor had a few official duties. This is a specific task or responsibility that someone is obligated or required to perform as part of their overall job, office, or role.
A specific task or responsibility that comes with the role.
Province applies to a function, office, or duty that naturally or logically falls within one's range of jurisdiction or competence. Example, it is not the governor's province to set foreign policy. This describes the entire area, scope, or domain of responsibility, authority, or competence that belongs to a particular person, office, or position.
So let me try this. Function is the job the thing does, its purpose. Office is the job the person does because of their role. Duty is a specific task or responsibility within that role, and province is the whole area of responsibility or authority for that role.
Exactly. They range from the purpose of an object to the scope of a person's responsibility, providing language to define roles, tasks, and areas of authority with clarity.
Let's look at knowing something before it happens. Foresee, foreknow, divine, apprehend, and anticipate. The core idea is to know or understand something beforehand.
Foresee is the most general term. It implies nothing about how the knowledge is derived and may apply to ordinary reasoning and experience. Example: no one could foresee the economic crisis. This is simply knowing or predicting something will happen using normal human means, like prediction based on trends, reasoning, or experience.
Knowing through normal human prediction or reasoning, standard stuff.
Foreknow stresses prior knowledge and implies supernatural assistance, as through revelation or divine power. Example: if only we could foreknow our own destinies. This suggests a non-ordinary, perhaps supernatural, mystical, or divinely granted way of knowing the future.
Knowing through revelation or supernatural means, okay, less standard.
Divine adds to foresee the suggestion of exceptional wisdom or discernment that allows one to understand something that is not obvious to others. Example: a European traveler who divined the course of American destiny. This implies knowing or understanding through deep insight, intuition, or exceptional perception beyond just ordinary reasoning.
Knowing through deep insight or intuition, like a sudden, profound understanding.
Right. Apprehend introduces emotion. It implies foresight mingled with uncertainty, anxiety, or dread. Example: apprehended that his odd behavior was a sign of a troubled soul. This isn't just knowing something might happen, it's anticipating it with a specific emotional response of worry, fear, or dread.
Anticipating something, but specifically with a feeling of anxiety or dread. Okay, that's very specific.
Anticipate implies such foreknowledge as leads or allows one to take action about or respond emotionally to something before it happens. Example: the servants anticipated our every need. This is knowing something will happen in a way that enables you to prepare for it, take action in advance, or respond emotionally ahead of time.
So you can know beforehand through normal reasoning, foresee, supernatural means, foreknow, deep insight, divine, with anxiety or dread, apprehend, or in a way that allows you to prepare or act ahead of time, anticipate. Quite the toolkit for prescience.
They describe different methods, sources, or qualities of prescience, from simple prediction to mystical insight, fear-driven expectation, or preparedness.
How about telling something beforehand actually making a prediction? This is the foretell group. Foretell, predict, forecast, prophesy, and prognosticate. The core idea is to tell or announce something that will happen in the future.
Foretell is the general term, applying to the telling of a future event by any procedure or from any source of information. Example: seers foretold of calamitous events. This is the broadest term for making a statement about the future, regardless of how the information was obtained or the method used.
General term for predicting the future by any means.
Okay.
Predict commonly implies inference from facts or from accepted laws of nature. Example: astronomers predicted the return of the comet. This is prediction based on evidence, scientific laws, logical deduction, or established patterns. It's grounded in observable reality and rules.
Predicting based on facts, science, or logical inference. More grounded. Forecast adds the implication of anticipating eventualities and differs from predict in being usually concerned with probabilities rather than certainties. Example: forecast a snowfall of 6 inches. This is prediction based on analyzing data and probabilities, often used for complex systems like weather or economics, anticipating potential outcomes rather than stating certainties.
Predicting based on probabilities and anticipating potential outcomes like weather or market trends.
Right. Prophesy connotes inspired or mystic knowledge of the future, especially as the fulfilling of divine threats or promises, or implies great assurance in predicting. Example: preachers prophesying a day of divine retribution. This suggests a prediction based on divine inspiration, mystical insight, or delivered with very high conviction and authority, often with a moral or spiritual dimension.
Predicting based on divine sources, mystic knowledge, or with very strong, often spiritual assurance. Okay.
Prognosticate suggests prediction based on the learned or skilled interpretation of signs or symptoms. Example: economists are prognosticating a slow recovery. This is prediction made by an expert analyzing specific indicators, signs, or symptoms within their field, common in medicine, prognosis, or economics, prognostication.
Predicting based on expert analysis of signs or indicators in a specific field. So predicting the future isn't just one thing. You can make a general prediction, foretell, base it on facts and science, predict, use probabilities and anticipate outcomes, forecasts, rely on mystic inspiration or high spiritual assurance, prophesy, or base it on learned analysis of signs by an expert, prognosticate.
They describe different bases and methods for making claims about what will happen. It's quite nuanced.
It highlights the diverse origins and methods behind making statements about the future. Okay, Let's look at forgetfulness losing something from one's mind. This is the forgetful group. Forgetful, oblivious, and unmindful. The core idea is losing from one's mind something once known or learned or failing to take note.
Forgetful implies a heedless or negligent habit of or propensity for failing to remember. Example, forgetful of my duties as host. This describes someone who has a tendency or habit of forgetting things because they are generally careless, inattentive, or have a poor memory. The antonyms are mindful and solicitous.
A habit of failing to remember due to carelessness or poor memory? Okay.
Oblivious suggests a failure to notice or remember as a result of external causes or conditions, or sometimes of a determination to ignore. Example, lost in thought, oblivious to the rushing crowd around her. This forgetting or lack of noticing is due to being distracted, engrossed in something else, or sometimes deliberately choosing not to pay attention to something. It's about failing to take note due to external factors or internal focused disregard.
Forgetting or not noticing because you're distracted, engrossed, or perhaps choosing to ignore it?
Right. Unmindful is very similar to oblivious. It may suggest inattention and heedlessness, or a deliberate disregard. Example, a crusading reformer who is unmindful of his family's needs. Like oblivious, this can describe someone who is careless or inattentive to something, or someone who is purposefully choosing to disregard or ignore something important. The antonyms are also mindful and solicitous.
So forgetting can be a general careless habit, forgetful,
Yeah.
or it can be a failure to notice or remember specifically because you're distracted or you're intentionally disregarding something, oblivious, unmindful.
They distinguish between a chronic tendency to forget versus a failure to notice or remember due to specific circumstances, a state of mind like distraction, or a deliberate act of disregard.
Let's look at precursors, things that signal or lead the way for something else. This is the forerunner group. Forerunner, precursor, harbinger, and herald. The core idea is one who goes before or announces the coming of another.
Forerunner is the broadest term. It is applicable to anything that serves as a sign, omen, or warning of something to come. Example, the international incident was a forerunner to war. This is the most general term for any person, thing, or event that simply comes before and signals that something else, often something significant, is on its way.
Any sign that something is coming. Simple.
Precursor applies to a person or thing that specifically paves the way for the success or accomplishment of another. Example, 18th century poets who were precursors of the Romantics. This suggests a more active role than a forerunner. A precursor not only comes before, but also helps create the necessary conditions, ideas, or groundwork that makes the later development or success possible.
Sets the stage, actively prepares the ground for what follows. More active, yeah.
Harbinger and herald are often used figuratively, and both apply to one that proclaims or announces the coming or arrival of a notable event or person. Examples, robins, the harbingers of spring, or the herald of a new age in medical science. These terms personify the sign or indicator, suggesting they are actively announcing or proclaiming the arrival of something significant or notable, much like a town crier.
Harbinger and herald are like announcers, proclaiming that something important is arriving. More dramatic.
Yes, they carry a more evocative sense of actively signaling the arrival of something noteworthy. So a forerunner is just something that precedes and signals. A precursor actively helps create the conditions for what follows. And harbinger herald are like announcers proclaiming the arrival of something significant.
That's a great set of words for describing how events or people can signal or lead to future developments.
Okay.
Finally, let's stimulate our senses with words describing pleasant smells. This is the fragrance group. Fragrance, perfume, bouquet, scent, incense, and redolence. The core idea is a sweet or pleasant odor. Fragrance suggests the pleasant odors of flowers or other growing things. Example, household cleansers with the fragrance of pine. This is usually a light, delicate, often natural smell, typically associated with plants. The antonyms are stench and stink. Pretty clear opposites there.
Yes, natural, often light and floral. Perfume may suggest a stronger or heavier odor and applies especially to a prepared or synthetic liquid. Example, the perfume of lilacs filled the room, can be natural but implies intensity, or she wore a floral perfume. This can be a natural smell but often refers to manufactured liquid scents and can be stronger or heavier than fragrance.
Can be natural but often artificial and potentially stronger.
Okay, bouquet, often used of wine, implies a delicate, complex odor that suggests the distinctive savory quality of its source. Example, the bouquet of ripe apples. This term is used for a nuanced, multi-layered scent that is characteristic of its source, particularly in things like wine, fruit, or other foods, suggesting complexity and quality derived from its origin.
A delicate, complex smell that comes from a specific source, often used for wine or food.
Scent is very close to perfume, but more neutral in connotation and wider in application. Example: furniture polish with a fresh lemon scent. This is a general neutral term for a pleasant smell without the strong associations of fragrance, natural delicate, or perfume, potentially strong artificial liquid.
A general, neutral, pleasant smell. Useful.
Incense applies specifically to the smoke from burning spices and gums and suggests a pleasing odor produced this way. Example: the exotic incense of a Middle Eastern bazaar. This is specific to smells created by burning aromatic substances.
Smell from burning aromatic things. Got it.
Redolence implies a mixture of fragrant or pungent odors and often evokes strong associations or memories. Example: the redolence of a forest after a rain. This suggests a complex blend of multiple smells, often rich and evocative, capturing the overall olfactory impression of a place, time, or experience.
A blended, complex, often evocative smell, like the overall scent of a place. Lovely word.
These terms differentiate smells based on their source.
Yeah.
Growing things, liquid, burning, multiple sources. Their quality, delicate, strong, complex, neutral, and their character, single note versus blended. Choosing the right word allows us to paint a very specific picture for the sense of smell.
It gives you a fantastic palette for describing scents.
Wow.
It truly does.
Wow.
We've certainly taken a deep dive into the nuances of language today, exploring how words we might group together as simple synonyms actually reveal these intricate layers of meaning. From describing the specific ways something can be external or the subtle differences in outward form, to distinguishing the many shades of faithfulness and faithlessness, classifying the different kinds of invented realities, and detailing the varied ways we describe fairness, character flaws, submissive behaviors, or direct communication.
And we journey to the language of outcomes, to remarkable achievements, different types of productivity, the many methods of frustrating plans, the very natures of failure, the qualities of fullness. The distinct ways things can be firm or fragile, the different emotional colors of predetermined fate, the subtle indicators of favorable conditions, the rich vocabulary for describing light and undesirable qualities, the different aspects of freedom, and the ways we describe functions, knowing or telling the future, forgetfulness, and things that precede others. It's quite a landscape.
What this deep dive shows us, I think, time and again, is that language isn't just about having a word to point to something. It's about having words that capture incredibly precise experiences, intentions, qualities, relationships, and states of being.
Right.
This precision isn't just for writers or academics. It allows for clearer thought, more accurate communication, and, well, a deeper appreciation of the world in all its complexity.
It provides us with a more granular understanding of concepts we often take for granted, revealing surprising distinctions hiding in plain sight.
As we wrap up this exploration, let's leave you with a thought, straight from the source material, that perhaps underscores the power and maybe the occasional limitations of language. We saw how words like fragile and brittle provide incredibly specific ways to describe physical properties, right?
Very precise.
Or how perfidious captures a very distinct, vile kind of moral failure. Language gives us scalpel-like precision there.
Yet the dictionary also describes feeling very broadly, denoting any response marked by pleasure, pain, attraction, or repulsion, potentially saying almost nothing specific about the nature or intensity.
Yeah.
As in the example, whatever feelings I had for him are gone.
Right.
It can be a very general, almost empty container word for internal states.
But then, as we saw, the same source gives us words like fear, which implies anxiety and loss of courage, often without a real cause, fear of the unknown, and dread, which adds the idea of intense reluctance to face something, the dread of having to face her mother. These words are incredibly specific, sharp, and textured in their emotional description.
So after diving into all these precise meanings for external things and specific negative states, consider this. Language gives us a very broad, almost vague word like feeling for a general internal response, but then provides such incredibly precise, distinct words for something as intense and specific as types of fear or apprehension. Fear, dread.
What does that tell you about how we use language to describe our internal states? When do we reach for the general, almost vague feeling, and when do we need the sharp, specific precision of dread? What drives us to be incredibly precise about some internal experiences, but leave others in a broad, undefined category?
Maybe ponder the precision within the vagueness of your own language when describing what's inside. Something to think about.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the surprising and powerful world of synonyms and antonyms. We hope it inspires you to look a little closer at the words you use and maybe discover the perfect fit every time.